All right, all right. So, welcome to yet another episode with your host and coach, yours truly, Rami Balut. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you this week as well. And topic of conversation for this week is around social loafing. I don't know if any of you have actually heard of that term, but it's a term that you probably should know about, at least consider and think about if you are a part of a ongoing, growing organization. Perhaps your organization has recently expanded, your company's expanded, perhaps your manager leader has acquired a new organization, and basically your organization or your team has grown quite significantly or proportionally compared to what it once was, maybe a year ago, maybe two, maybe three. But there is this constant progression of a growing team. And when a team grows, well, a lot of people in leadership will think of the term of social loafing. And social loafing is a quite interesting term. I think about that a lot. And really, what it is, in my definition, is when there are more people involved, there's typically less motivation and less drive to give one's full strength or full dedication or full focus or full amount of energy. And where this concept came from, if I'm not mistaken, was a gentleman by the name of Max Ringelmann. He was a French engineer. I believe it was the late 1800s. And this idea of social loafing came about then when he was measuring the effort by a horse when this horse was joined by a companion, another companion horse. I guess in those days it was on, pulling a carriage, so to speak. I'd imagine it was only that or something like it. And what Ringelmann actually noticed was, this horse that was, pulling all this concerted effort. Let's just say it was around 95% for intensive purposes for our chat today. And when this horse was joined by another horse, well, then that effort, significantly dropped, or at least dropped to a level that was quite noticeable. And doing this with horses, he decided to do it, or at least run this experiment with humans. And I think they did it with like a tug of war sort of thing, or what we actually use today with a rope. And he realized that, when you are just one person pulling this rope, your effort, your strength, the amount of energy you put into it is significantly higher than when you are joined by another person. And then imagine you're joined by another person, and then another person, and another person. What could have been your effort, let's just say of like a 95% exertion, can significantly start dropping the more people you actually have on a team. And so what does that sort of call into question? From a leadership perspective, it's kind of like, larger the team, does that mean, the lower the effort? Does that mean that the lower the energy, the lower the drive, the lower the motivation? Well, it's a valid question, whether or not you agree with it, that goes on in the minds of some senior executives that I've had the privilege of coaching over the years. And that is, hey, Rami, you know what? I've made a transition into this new organization. And rather than actually managing 50 people, now I'm managing 200 people. I spoke to a client just today, actually, telling me that she was now going to be managing at minimum 200 to 300 people in her new organization, her new role, after managing about 150 prior. So that's a significant increase, almost a 100% increase. And so it begs the question, like, what happens to people's productivity, to their motivation, to their drive, when they're not working at it alone anymore? Now, I know a lot of you, as working ants in our society, who are continuously pulling above our weight and struggling to get ahead, think about this, because it's kind of like, well, if we are, let's just say, overutilized, well, in many instances, we think like, hey, we're under delivering. And so what if we actually had more people join our team? Wouldn't we then be delivering more? Well, there's a question mark that actually comes to mind. And for many of you, the answer is like unequivocally yes, especially in today's line of business where there's hiring freezes, there's a pause on hiring. The Fed is trying to get the recession in order. And what is that going to mean for hiring, for employment? We don't know. I certainly don't know. I know, a lot of things continue as business as usual. In other industries, they do not. I hope, obviously, you're not going to be infected. in any which way. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, not just like a comment in passing here. But going back to this topic, if we had more people, well, doesn't that mean we would produce more? It may not necessarily actually be the case. And, as it relates to our conversation with one another, well, how does that actually affect you? And that's really who I care about here. It's you. And so in this particular case, I want to make you aware of this as a concept. And at minimum, make you think about, question, at least make note of or be aware of the fact that, your leadership as your team grows may question your team's productivity and may question your drive, and may even question at times your motivation. And who actually wants that, right? And so how do we sort of navigate around that? How can you become aware of that, whether it's unintentional or intentional with social loafing? And I want to make you aware of a couple of things here. So typically, but just pure human nature here. When we are running at full steam ahead, and all of a sudden, we have team members that we never had before. A team member here, a team member here, a team member here. They're coming from all over the place right now. And all of a sudden, we've got this team. What happens then? Well, I mean, typically we'll say like, okay, let me delegate this to you. Let me leverage this to you. Let me transition some of my work over to you. And you know what? All of a sudden, we start getting this time back, which is absolutely wonderful. And that's a beautiful thing. But what ends up happening in this particular situation is when we do get that time back, it's like, okay, so what are we going to do now? So you've given this time back now. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? How are you going to leverage it? Are you going to be running at full steam ahead? Well, if you've got this team now, you may not necessarily be doing so. And so what do you do with that time given back? Now, for many of us, we may say like, you know what, it's time to kick back, relax a little bit, manage our work-life balance, all very, very important things. But there comes a time, I believe there comes a time when you're like, okay, so what next? I had this massive drive, and I, by the way, innately believe that we all have a drive when we are actually aligned. Our passions and our professions are yielding some level of profitability here. So I'm presuming that we're actually aligned. So when we are aligned, we actually have a level of, passion that's still giving us this drive, but we don't know sort of where to go and how to dedicate it. Now that we actually have this time back, rather than feel a little bit of aloof, feel like, we're disengaged, bored. Yeah, boredom is a thing at work. It's a thing, and that's normal, by the way. At least here, taking the time to realize that, hey, what if I use some of this drive that I've, innately have, and now that I have this time back, what if I use it towards like my own benefit here? And how can I do so in a very, very deliberate way? And so here is sort of like where on the deliberate side, on the conscious side of things, when we're thinking about like self-loafing, we've got to think about like, where is our motivation? And sometimes when we are given this time back, we may think about things from a very macro level. And we're thinking about things like, okay, so what have I been doing all this time? Where have I been going? What are my outcomes? Where are these outcomes and how do they align to my own personal aspirations? What are some of those signals that I've been getting over the years over whether or not I'm actually aligning myself properly to those outcomes, that I know that I'm actually achieving in some way or getting closer to achieving some of those outcomes? And many of times, those outcomes become very elusive to us. And we start questioning like whether even we wanted those outcomes or not. It's very easy, by the way, to be given a level of work and given a level of direction and say, okay, run with it. And instead, when we're given this time back, this time we ever so coveted back, now we're stuck with the question of like, okay, so what do we do with this time? And here is really where I want you to think back to a time where you were truly passionate. Perhaps it was within the transition of your previous role to this role. Perhaps it was when you were promoted. Perhaps it was when you were speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager. about a role you really felt like, oh my gosh, if I had this, how much better would my life actually be? It's this level of enthusiasm. I want you to take yourself back, and I want you to start, thinking about like, what was it back then that made us so freaking excited? What was it back then that made you feel like, man, if this happens, oh my God, Rami, I'm going to catch the biggest break of my life. Rami, if this happens, oh my gosh, you want to talk about societal contribution? Well, if I get this, you'll have it. If you want to talk about like situational leadership, empathetic leadership, servant leadership, you know what? If I get this break, I get my lucky break here, Rami. This is when I'm actually going to do it. It's this level of excitement I want to take you back towards. I want you to think about for yourself and really try to like understand like, hey, how am I going to get this level of excitement back again? So now that I have this time back, that I'm not like driven 24/7 thinking about what I have to do and what I have to deliver, and I have this time back, really, where am I actually going with this? And before your manager or before anybody comes and tells you like, hey, by the way, you have this time back now, I was thinking about you taking this on going forward, and you're like, oh my God, please no. Please no, I'll go back to doing what I was doing instead of doing this now. So before that actual time happens, try to be very deliberate on what you want to be doing next. So in your work, at work, think about times where you can actually, network with other people in your organization. Think about perhaps where your skill sets, your capabilities are aligned with somebody else's needs. Think about a way where you can unify or standardize or showcase or just go on a roadshow with some of the work that you've been doing, gather some feedback, and then maybe take it from there. Rather than just stay aloof and just say, look, okay, I'm just going to take it easy. I've got this time back right now. And the reason why I say that is because I want you to have a very strong work-life balance, but at times it's just not going to happen. And I just want to be realistic with you. And that is, there are others that are cognizant and aware of just how much effort you're actually putting. And while you may have an amazing manager that says, you know what, this is great work-life balance for you, just chill, take it easy, I want you to prepare yourself for the time where someone will say like, hey, you know what? I want you to come and take a look at this. I want you to be a part of this. And that's when I want you to say, hold up, I actually am involved in doing a lot of other things and many more things, and perhaps things that are actually of greater scope and impact. Impact prevails overall, of course, here, and of greater value. And I find myself doing things of greater significance for myself because I was very deliberate and intentional about that. So I really want you to think about social loafing and getting around that in situations like this. Now, the subconscious mind, or like, the more like the natural side of things, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to chill. I just may take it easy, or I may then use this time to do some of my favorite things. And who doesn't want to do some of their favorite things, including like eating ice cream or something? I know that's one of my favorite things to do. But nevertheless, here, all jokes aside, it's like when we do have this time back, rather than just like relaxing and taking it easy and thinking about things that, may not necessarily be to our benefit, let's just make sure that you take some time back for yourself and be more deliberate about that time, because social loafing is a thing. It's like I had a professor back in college doing my bachelor's. What an amazing woman she is. I'm going to call her out here. Her name is Professor Paula Garb. And I remember back in Irvine, she said something to me that was so moving. Actually, over the years, I've actually written her and said, thank you so much, for imparting some of your wisdom on me. And one thing she actually said was, if you ever want to get something done, when you transition to your careers and professional life, if you ever want to get something done, remember, you want to give it to the person that actually has no time versus the person that has so much time. And rather than thinking about that conceptually, think about it practically. And that is, the people that actually don't have much time are those that have actually organized themselves so well. They've got such little time that their efficiency levels and productivity levels are sky high. Whereas those that really don't have much time, those are the individuals that are saying, you know what, the sun will come out tomorrow and things will just be better. And so let me go ahead, and I'm not going to start rhyming here, but let me just go ahead and then push that off, and I'll get to it tomorrow. I'll wake up early and do it. I can leave it till tomorrow night, somewhere in between. You get what I'm saying here. So, and guess what? Many leaders think that way. And I want you to be aware of that. For better or for best, I want you to use it towards your advantage. And that's really the point of all this. So remember, the next time your organization grows, your team grows, your company grows, consider social loafing and some of the ways we've navigated around that today in our discussion. And I hope you use that to your advantage always. Until next time, this is your host and coach, Rami Balut, and I'll see you soon. Bye.